Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1959's Plan 9 from Outer Space, directed by Edward D. Wood, Jr.
It is safe to state that the grandchildren of some of the people in this theater will not be born on Earth. They come from the bowels of hell, a transformed race of walking dead, zombies guided by a master plan for complete domination of the Earth. Plan 9 from Outer Space. Starring the most nightmarish cast ever, Bela Lugosi, the seductive Vampira, and Ford Johnson as the Walking Dead.
Turn off your electrode gun! No! No! Stop him, Dennis!
I can't get it, it's jammed!
Stop him, you fool!
Bullets bounce off their bodies. Rockets, missiles, jets cannot stop their death ships. What earthly power can stop this terror? For a glimpse of things to come, see this blast of screen suspense. For it could be happening right now.
I suppose it was inevitable that we would show this film sometime. When you host a show that, for the most part, wallows in the dregs of cinema, there are some films that just cannot be ignored. Plan 9 from Outer Space is one of those films, perhaps the most well-known bad film ever made. But over the last 25 years or so, Plan 9 has gained the reputation of being the worst film ever made. Baloney! There are so many films so much worse than this one that it's not funny. And believe me, I know. I've watched them. We've broadcast a good many of them on this show. A few that immediately come to mind are 1934's Maniac, 1964's The Creeping Terror, 1961's The Beast of Yucca Flats. The end is listless, as they say. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Plan 9 from Outer Space is a good movie. It's not. It bites, but it's certainly not the worst movie ever made. In spite of all the truly awful movies I've seen, I'd actually be hard-pressed to name one that tops any absolute worst list. There are so many things that can go wrong with a movie that to point one out and definitively say that's the worst movie ever made is impossible, to tell the truth. I've seen a lot that come really damn close, mind you, but the best anyone can really do is tell you what the worst film they've ever seen is, and even then it's only their opinion. For instance, it's a fact that Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow is a complete waste of time, money, talent, green screen material, and celluloid. I actually know people, smart people, people I respect, that love that movie. When I question their allegiance to said excrement, they usually hem and haw and give me some whiny explanation of how it takes them back to their childhood in some way, because the robots look like the ones from the Fleischer Superman cartoons or something. And I myself will admit that the shots of the robots in the trailer is the reason I saw that movie to begin with, and that the similarity of the robots to the aforementioned cartoon played a huge role in my wanting to see the movie. And to give the film its due, the robots were indeed very cool. However, that did not justify wasting nearly 2 hours of my time and however much money I spent paying to see it. That movie is the equivalent of seeing a 2-hour film starring Jar Binks and no one else. I forgive Jar Binks for one reason and one reason only. It was an experiment to see if a 100% computer-generated character could realistically interact with live actors. Okay, fine. It was incredibly annoying, but it wasn't the whole movie. In Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, the CG was the movie. Story came in a very distant second, and that's not right. Special effects are supposed to service a story, not the other way around. Getting back to the subject, Plan 9 received its undeserved rep from the Medved brothers, the authors of the 50 Worst Films of All Time. I own that book, as well as the sequels, the Golden Turkey Awards, some of the Golden Turkey Awards, and the Hollywood Hall of Shame. When I was younger, I found them rather entertaining, but when I look at them now, they're written with such smarminess and arrogance that I find them a bit repugnant, especially after having worked on movie sets myself. It's easy to point and laugh at bad movies, but the fact is that most of the time, the people who created these things actually put a lot of sweat and effort and heart into them, truly believing they were making something worthwhile. And sometimes it's impossible to distance yourself from something you've worked so hard on and recognize that it is indeed junk. I've created a couple of those myself, so, I'm not immune to failure. Again, however, there are some people who are so convinced that they're either brilliant or working on something brilliant, in spite of a total lack of talent or even rudimentary knowledge of the filmmaking process, that they ride the arrogance they get from their misplaced confidence in the talent they don't possess into your face like a palmetto bug you missed swatting with a rolled-up newspaper. They're like the people you see audition for American Idol that are absolutely convinced they have talent when in truth they couldn't carry a tune if you held a gun to their heads. Delusion runs rampant. Plan 9 from Outer Space began life as a vehicle for Bela Lugosi called The Ghoul Goes West. Since Lugosi was in no shape to ride a horse, Wood came up with another script called The Vampire's Tomb. When Lugosi died after shooting a few scenes, those being he walking around outside Tor Johnson's house, standing at a graveside crying, and walking out of the woods spreading his Dracula cape, Wood shelved the footage. Soon after, he was approached by a friend, J. Edward Reynolds, an elder in the Baptist community, who had the rights to the Billy Sunday story and thought he'd raise the money to do it by funding a sci-fi horror epic from a script Wood had written around the Lugosi footage called Grave Robbers from Outer Space. Reynolds and two other friends, Reverend Lynn Lemon and Hugh Thomas, kicked in about $500 each, figuring they could make enough from this movie to make the Billy Sunday story. All of them wanted parts in the movie, so Reynolds and Thomas appeared in the film as gravediggers, and Lemon appeared as the Reverend saying the final words over the grave of Inspector Clay. Reynolds made his contribution on the condition that the cast members be baptized and become members of the church. Wood readily agreed, and after he talked the cast into it, the ceremony was held at the house of a member of the church. Wood later recalled, Tor Johnson was watching everyone get in it and getting dunked 3 times while the minister read prayers. Well, just when it was his time to get into the pool, he whispered to me, "Watch what happens when he dunk me 3rd time." So the skinny old Reverend Father dunks Tor for the 3rd time, and Tor stayed on the bottom. The Reverend was screaming, "Help, help, he's drowning, help, help," and running around like a madman trying to get someone to help him get that huge wrestler out of the pool. They came across with a lot of money. The producers felt the title Grave Robbers from Outer Space was sacrilegious, however, and insisted that Wood change the title. He fought them on it, but ultimately lost, and the movie was released with its current moniker. In the original screenplay, Lugosi was not only the husband of the vampire character, but also the father of the airline pilot's wife. The scene where he leaves his house in the final cut would have continued with his visiting the wife's grave, and then stopping by his daughter and son-in-law's place to discuss his belief in flying saucers. This doesn't explain why the daughter and her husband aren't at the funeral, although I suppose Wood could have shot an insert of them in the cemetery. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, Lugosi died at the outset of filming, so Wood had to improvise, killing him off screen in the scene outside the house. I tell you about it, but I'm not going to spoil that. It's one of the highlights of the movie, so to speak. The plot of the movie is as follows. Aliens from another planet, who are apparently very heavy into musical theater, send insulting messages to the Army trying to stop them from developing nuclear weapons, and when they're ignored, decide to employ the dreaded Plan 9, which involves the resurrection of the recently dead. What the first 8 plans were is never discussed, which is probably a good thing considering how Plan 9 works out. While these aliens are obviously advanced, having achieved interstellar travel, the ability to raise the dead, and the invention of the dicto-robitaire, they are completely unable to take a backhanded swing. And to tell the truth, from the looks of it, whatever wars they participated in probably involved a lot of windmill slapping and scratching, so when they meet a two-fisted ex-Marine, it's all over. There is one scene that does stand out, however, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. The scene where Tor Johnson rises from the grave, which is quite impressive. It is until Tor starts having a hard time getting out of the coffin anyway. Edward D. Wood Jr. was born on October 10, 1924 in Poughkeepsie, New York. He got his first camera at the age of 11. One of the first things he shot was a Zeppelin Hindenburg as it headed for Lakehurst, New Jersey on its final flight. He would organize and put on plays with the neighborhood kids while growing up and fell in love with the movies early in life. His wife, Kathy, recalled Ed telling her that when he was young, his mother, who was a bit of a martinet, would dress him up in girls' clothing as punishment when he was bad. A lot of his early life is covered in his first film, the semi-autobiographical Glenna. How much truth is in that film is open to question, but Ed did grow up to be a confirmed transvestite. He was 100% heterosexual, but he loved wearing women's clothes, Angora sweaters being a particular favorite. He joined the Marines at the age of 17 and served in the South Pacific. During the battle on Tarawa, 4,000 Marines went in and 400 came out. His entire platoon was killed, and during a counterattack, he manned a machine gun and single-handedly wiped out the Japanese advancing on his position. He had his front teeth knocked out by a Japanese soldier during a hand-to-hand battle and didn't take too kindly to that. He bayoneted the enemy soldier to death. He remembered being scared during the battle, not so much of dying as being wounded, since he usually wore a bra and panties under his uniform. Wood was seriously injured during another battle, being machine-gunned up one leg, in which he almost lost to gangrene. Luckily, he was wearing Army-issue underwear when he was wounded, so that wasn't an issue. He was awarded the Purple Heart, the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with oak leaf clusters, and a Sharpshooter's Medal, among others. He also worked with G2 in the South Pacific, doing reconnaissance and spying. When he left the Marines with an honorable discharge, he wanted to get into the entertainment business and joined a traveling carnival, working as a geek and the half-man, half-woman. After the carnival, he moved into theater, where he wrote and produced his first play, The Casual Company. After this, he moved to Hollywood and shot a 16mm TV pilot called Crossroads of Laredo, which was never sold. He was quite a ladies' man, and Paul Marco recalled that if he ever saw a girl wearing an Angora sweater, he'd pick her up just to get at the sweater. In 1952, an ex-GI by the name of George Jorgensen became the first male in history to undergo sex reassignment surgery. Emerging from the procedure is Christine Jorgensen. Exploitation producer George Weiss saw money in this story and hired Wood to rush out a quickie movie on the subject. Wood, however, saw this as a golden opportunity to educate the world on the subject of transvestism and ran with it, writing his first produced screenplay, Glenn or Glenda. The film includes a subplot involving a young man, Alan Ann, whose tale closely follows the story of Christine Jorgensen, but the main body of the film involves the struggle of Glenn Glenda to come to grips with not only his urges to dress in women's clothing, but his relationship with Barbara, who, we're told innumerable times, is a lovely, intelligent girl. She can't be too intelligent, however, since every time she wears an Angora sweater, she doesn't notice Glenn is more than just a little bit distracted. Glenn or Glenna didn't do very well in its initial release, despite the fact that Weiss spiced it up a bit with completely unrelated shots of various kinky behavior involving S&M, B&D, and this incredibly hippie woman tearing her dress off. It was released several times under the titles I Changed My Sex, I Led Two Lives, and He or She, but barely made back its negative cost. Wood's next film was the crime movie Jailbait, originally entitled The Hidden Face, followed by Bride of the Monster, and then tonight's film, Plan 9. Between Bride and Plan 9, he wrote screenplays for 5 films and completed his directorial career with 1959's Night of the Ghouls and 1960's The Sinister Urge, and Ersatz Dragnet ripoff involving the smut picture racket, which we'll get on the show eventually. In spite of all the preceding info I've just given you, finding out who the real Ed Wood Jr. was is just about impossible. The best book I've been able to find about him is Rudolph Gray's excellent Nightmare of Ecstasy, which is filled cover to cover with interviews taken from people who lived, worked, and hung out with Wood, in addition to interviews with Wood himself. The thing of it is that the stories told are massively contradicted in many ways. People who were friends call him a genius and lament the fact that he never achieved fame, while ones who worked with him recall him as an alcoholic hack who ripped off everyone he worked with. I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. Ed Wood was a man who loved movies as fervently as he loved Angora and did whatever was necessary to achieve his dream of being a director. If that involved ripping people off and lying through his teeth, so be it. The entertainment business is full to overflowing with people who do the same thing to achieve their ends, and a very small percentage of those ever see a film through to completion. Ed Wood didn't exactly eke out a living making movies, but he did make movies, however inept and awful they may be. In a perverse way, I imagine he serves as an inspiration to people who like to believe that if he could do it, they could. God, talk about a double-edged sword. Anyone who owns a video camera and a rudimentary computerized editing system thinks they're a filmmaker. But as I've said innumerable times before, it takes more than knowing where the record button on the camera is to make a movie, just as it takes more than owning software that correctly formats a screenplay to make you a writer. Subscribing to HBO is not a film credential. Okay, rant's over. Ed Wood's career, such as it was, went in a decline, or should I say more in a decline, after finishing The Sinister Urge. He began writing porn novels and movies where his amazing typing skills came to serve him well. He was able to knock out a script or a book in a day if necessary. Paul Marco remembered Wood being able to eat, smoke, drink, visit with friends, and work on 3 or 4 scripts and books all at once. He never rewrote or proofread his work. I can attest to this, as when I read the copy of Hollywood Rat Race Bill O'Baggy brought over when I showed him Glenna or Glenna. It was the original manuscript. It was typed very neatly, no corrections, no crossouts, nothing. Of course, being fast is not the same thing as being good, but when you're writing porn, good doesn't really enter into it. As long as you can describe certain things in loving detail, the publisher is happy. Wood drank constantly. His favorite cocktail was a vodka gimlet, but near the end he drank either cheap blended whiskey or straight vodka. His friends said that near the end of his life, the affable, friendly Ed Wood disappeared and became another person, paranoid and bitter. Dudley Manlove recalled Wood calling him to borrow $5. Manlove offered to buy him enough food to last a month, but Wood demanded the money. Manlove refused to give him money for booze, and Wood shouted, "I thought you were my friend," and hung up on him. Ed Wood spent most of the rest of his life moving from one place to another, each one shabbier than the next. In the end, he and his wife Kathy moved in with his friend Peter Cohen, his wife, where he died watching a football game on December 10th, 1978 in North Hollywood, California. He was 53. Say what you will about Ed Wood, but you have to admit the guy had determination. Although he was minimally, if at all, talented, he did something thousands of other wannabes only blew sky. He made movies. Incredibly sucky movies, but movies. See, the thing of it is, lots of people make movies and classify them as being in the spirit of Ed Wood. But the fact of it is, it's just a whitewash for inept acting, writing, and direction. I've seen any number of awful movies that use that tag, and none of them were 1/100th as entertaining as the worst Ed Wood film. His lack of talent was, in a perverse way, unique and unable to be imitated. I think that maybe what's missing in the work of the wannabes is the heart Wood put into his work. Then again, artlessness isn't art. Either way, if he were alive today, Ed would be reveling in the fame that his lack of talent brought him. Apparently, that's just the kind of guy he was. Okay, let's take a look at the cast. Gregory Walcott was born Bernard Maddox on January 13, 1928 in Wendell, North Carolina. He joined the Army soon after the end of World War II, and after getting mustered out, thumbed his way to Hollywood from New York, where he was discovered by a talent agent while appearing on stage in a little theater production. He appeared in 105 movies and television shows over the course of his career, starting with an uncredited role in 1925's The Red Skies of Montana. The first role he gained true recognition for was as the drill instructor Sergeant Jim Beller in 1955's Battle Cry, and afterwards won a contract with Warner Brothers. In 1961, he switched allegiance to Universal and starred in the television series 87th Precinct with Robert Lansing. His television career continued and he became one of Clint Eastwood's regular troupe, appearing in 1974's Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, 1975's The Iger Sanction, and 1978's Every Which Way But Loose, among many others. He appeared in Plan 9 as a favor to Ed Reynolds, who belonged to the same church. He hated the script and said it was the worst he'd ever read, but he did promise Reynolds he'd do the picture, and he was a man of his word. Remembering the first scene she shot for the movie, Walcott recalled, "Ed's films are in another category, 3 rungs below B movies, dingy, third-rate, fringe-type films. He was undisciplined and had no taste. If he had $10 million, it would have been, to paraphrase Mr. Walcott for the purposes of government access TV, tasteless." His most recent film appearance was as a potential backer for Plan 9 in Tim Burton's highly fictionalized biopic, Ed Wood. Mona McKinnon was born on May 1st, 1929 in Tennessee. I was going to tell you more about her, but there's nothing to tell other than she was in 6 movies. This one, Jailbait, as a ticket girl who gets shot in a theater. Night of the Ghouls as teenage delinquent girl. I think that's the one who got killed by the black ghost while making out with her boyfriend in the car. 1957's Teenage Thunder, 1993's Hellborn, and the unforgettable Mesa of Lost Women as one of the Spider Girls. With a resume like that, I'm shocked that I can't find out anything else about her. I can't even find out what town she was born in, for God's sake. She died on March 12, 1990 in Los Angeles, California. Now, just in case you're wondering how she could appear in a movie released in 1993, Hellborn was actually worked on for a decade by Ed Wood and Conrad Brooks and was never finished. Since most people in the movie business have about as much integrity as a child molester, the unfinished footage was added to and released as a 55-minute movie on video. Nice. James Duke Moore was born on July 15, 1913, and was a drinking buddy of Ed Wood's, which was probably about as much of an audition that anyone who ever worked with him did. He died of a heart attack on November 16, 1976, in Hollywood, California. Dudley Manlove was born on June 11, 1914, in Alameda County, California. He appeared in 4 movies and 3 TV shows, but found success on the radio as the voice of Lux Soap, among other things. By all accounts, he was a generous and loyal man. He died on April 17, 1996, in San Bernardino County, California. Now, this is hard to believe, but the only other person in the cast I haven't previously done a biography for and could actually find something out about is the guy who played the ruler, John Cabell Breckinridge. Bunny, as he was called by his friends, was born on August 9, 1903 in Paris, France. He came from a wealthy California family and was descended from a U.S. Attorney General as well as a U.S. Vice President. Known for his flamboyance, Breckinridge was openly gay in a time when it was very dangerous to be so, wearing perfume and makeup in public while mincing around town while appearing in Shakespearean plays in England. While performing in drag in Paris during the 20s, he met and married a woman rumored to be of French royalty. He had a daughter with her, naming her Solange, and they divorced 2 years later. He moved to San Francisco in the late 1920s and continued to perform in drag reviews. He met Ed Wood while staying, for some reason, at Paul Marco's house, and the two instantly hit it off. Bunny was probably wearing Angora at the time. He was determined to have a sex change operation in Sweden, but had to cancel the trip when he was ordered by a judge to fulfill an agreement to pay about $8,500 a month to support his blind elderly mother in England. He made arrangements to undergo the procedure in Mexico, but was involved in a horrendous car crash on the way, in which his young male secretary, who he had planned to wed after the operation, was killed. He abandoned his plans for a sex change soon after that. After being arrested several times and charged with lewd behavior, he retired to his bungalow in San Francisco, which was filled with pictures of friends he made over the years, including J. Edgar Hoover, who he probably met at a drag party. Bunny Breckinridge died on November 5th, 1996 in San Francisco. Well, what else can I say about Plan 9? The fact that it's an incompetent, badly acted, wretchedly written, and ineptly directed pile of cinematic excrement is well documented, and I really don't think I can add anything else to that. All I can add to what I've already said is this. Don't judge Ed Wood too harshly. I'm not apologizing for what he did. Like I said earlier, he was marginally, if at all, talented. But at the end of the day, he was a dreamer that managed to achieve his dream at a time when making a movie wasn't just a matter of picking up a video camera, shooting a bunch of non-talents, and pasting it together in a computer. Eventually, his weaknesses overcame his passion, and he died a sad, lonely death. He left behind a handful of films that people laugh at, but there are worse things than leaving laughter behind when you're gone. I laugh when I watch his films, and I laugh because I enjoy them. That may not seem satisfying to many people, but Ed Wood also managed to be remembered and even revered in a strange way. I know many people who wouldn't want that kind of legacy, but I think Ed would have reveled in the fame he's finally achieved. If he were alive today, he'd probably be making thousands of dollars a night on the lecture circuit. And I know I'd go to hear him speak, just as I know I would be among the hundreds of people who would get to their feet and give him a standing ovation the second he hit the stage. So if you walk away from this with nothing other than a sense of disbelief that anything like this movie could actually see the light of day, also take along the knowledge that if you believe in yourself, you can make your dreams come true. So right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy Plan 9 from Outer Space, right here on Cleveland Classics Cinema.